Go ahead and jump right in and begin. We thank you all for attending today. Once again, this is going to be a conversation about the closure of Beatty Hill 1351 and 1800 for the upcoming summer term. We'll go into details specifically about the closure and all of that here in just a moment. But I do want to just take a moment to, we understand and just discuss that we understand this is kind of stressful information and this may impact a good number of the residents there at Beatty Hill. We don't take these types of closures lightly. The need for this project is very simple. It impacts the life safety equipment there. The building is safe, but we've got to start making upgrades to the equipment. Please understand that this is very early in this process. We will talk about some of the impacts and some of the policy changes that we're making to help expedite this process. But please know that we may not have all of the answers today. So if you have some questions, we'll take notes. There will also be our contact information at the very end. So you can reach out to us if should you need any information that we can't answer today. With that, we'll go in and do some introductions here. My name is Stephen Wiley. I'm the Director for Administrative Services here at Carolina Housing. Today, your host will be Jordan Cady, who's our Assistant Director for Housing Assignments here at UNC. And we also have the team down at Beatty Hill. We'd like to also introduce Kelly McKnight, our Assignments Manager down at Beatty. So with that, I'll give the floor to Jordan and we will dive right in. Please drop your questions in the Q&A section and we will hold those and answer them at the end. So we thank you very much. And without further ado, Jordan, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So we are, like Stephen mentioned, going to review what's happening with 1351 and 1800 this summer, and hopefully answer some of your questions and then provide an opportunity for you to ask us some as they maybe come up during our presentation. So the Q&A function is open if you want to drop your questions in there, but hopefully I'll be able to answer some of them as I go. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what Stephen mentioned earlier, why the buildings are closing, what the timeline for the 25-26 contract period is going to look like and how that is going to intersect with this process. We're going to talk about some of the options that will be available for students in these two buildings, particularly those that want to continue living on at Beatty Hill, and then some of the challenges that we're going to experience with those reassignments and really what we're going to try to do to make as much of that work as we can. And then at the end, we are going to have that Q&A section. So like we've mentioned in our email, simply put, we have some necessary upgrades for the life safety equipment in these two buildings. So they are functioning perfectly fine, but as buildings age, there are certain systems that just need to be updated every once in a while. And that is the case with 1351 and 1800. Because of the nature of this work, these buildings have to be completely vacant while the work is ongoing. The fire safety system is going to be offline, so it would be a significant safety risk if we were to have residents in the building at the same time of this work. Unfortunately, it just cannot be done. So we are going to have to formally close these buildings for June and July so that we can finish this work. And then tentatively, we're going to try to open the buildings by August 9th, but we'd love to get it open earlier if we can. Since the buildings are going to be empty, we're going to go ahead and take that opportunity to finish some upgrades that we've started in 1351. So we will work to furnish all units. That's been an ongoing need at the Beatty Hill community where we are not always able to accommodate as many students who would like furnished units in terms of how many we have. And then we have some updated countertops, bathroom mirrors, kitchen and bathroom light fixtures, and lockable bedroom doors. That has been a kind of a sporadic update as we've done turns, but since the building is going to be offline, we're going to go ahead and finish that. So any residents who might choose to come back to 1351, your space might look a little different and hopefully you'll think it looks even better. So this graphic is kind of a really big bird's eye view of the timeline of not really just the project, but the overall assignment process and changes, particularly for students who are really interested in returning. So you'll notice that the first section is the contract renewal. We have moved that up significantly. So for returning Beatty residents, you may have realized that in the past, we've done renewals in the spring. If we were to do that in the spring this year, we would not have enough information in a timely manner to be able to look at reassigning folks in 1351 and 1800 that want to stay with us. We do not want to leave you all on the hook and uncertain of our ability to house you. And so we're going to go ahead and move that deadline up, and that's going to be a permanent change for future years as well. And so our application to be able to renew at Beatty Hill is going to open up in the next couple weeks with the due date of January 17th. Again, that helps us make really important decisions and determine our availability for who is returning, what spaces will we have open, so that way we can start to identify how many students can we reassign from 1351 and 1800, absorb them back into the property. We'd love to get as many as we possibly can. For students in these two communities, if you renew your contract and you submit what we're going to call a summer 2025 plans form, which we'll talk a little bit about later, if you've let us know, hey, I'd really like to return, I'm either interested in coming back into my unit or maybe back into another one, by that first week in February, we'll start to work through some of those apartment transfer assignments. So again, once we're past the contract renewal date, and then the intent to vacate for any student who isn't renewing, we'll have that information by the end of January, which leaves us, the first week or so of February to be able to say, okay, what do we have open and where can we make some reassignment offers? For these students, you'll have an opportunity to accept or decline. So this is not a guarantee that you have to take what's offered, but you'll be able to decide, based on what's offered, if that's going to be a good fit for you. And if it's not, and you've already signed the housing contract, you are going to be able to cancel that for no penalty by March 3rd. So if we offer you something that you're not comfortable accepting, we're not going to hold you to the housing contract if you cancel by that March 3rd deadline. In general, these halls, like I mentioned earlier, they need to close and be truly vacant by June 1st at 5 p.m. so that we can begin that work. And then we'll anticipate reopening by that August 8th, August 9th deadline. So moving on to talking a little bit about housing options, there are generally three areas that we're going to discuss and review. One is an apartment transfer. So that's what we would call a permanent move to another space in Beatty Hill. A potential move out for the summer. So that might be students who are moving to some kind of temporary relocation space and then returning either into their current space when the buildings reopen or to a new space when the halls are officially open in August. And then what does it look like to potentially consider some temporary on-campus options, relocating to another furnished space, that we may or may not have available. So for an apartment transfer, again, this is a permanent move to another building within Beatty Hill. This will be based on limited availability. We're not going to know what options we have until after that renewal deadline of January 17th. But once we start to have that information about our vacancies or our projected vacancies at that time, we can then begin those offers that first week of February. We are going to do our absolute best to try and prioritize assigning and making offers based on the same apartment type, keeping roommates together if possible. But that will be challenging, and additional preferences such as a specific building or a floor, near the elevator, far from the elevator, any of those other details, to be entirely clear and honest, will be challenging to match. So that's part of why there'll be an opportunity that if we offer you something that, again, you're not comfortable with accepting and you would prefer to just find alternative housing off campus, you would be able to cancel for no penalty. But we're going to wait until we have all of our vacancy information as much as possible so we can try and match students up based on their preferences the very best that we can. So again, this is just some additional information about apartment transfers that kind of just like you would as a new resident, you'll have 72 hours to accept or decline, to call our office and ask us any questions. If you decide to decline, you do either need to move out and find alternative housing for the summer. And then if you're happy to come back into your unit, we will hold that for you for the fall. Or if you would like to just move forward with finding permanent off-campus housing, then you'd be able to cancel your housing contract with no penalty. Due to the contract dates for current residents, those ending May 31st, our ability to make some of these apartment transfers before June 1st are going to be a little bit limited. And so that's part of one of the major challenges we're going to face, is that our current residents, yourself included, right, your contract goes until May 31st. And we take about 2 to 3 weeks to turn each unit when someone moves out. And so trying to match up vacate dates with move dates will be a little bit challenging. So we're going to extend some offers to current residents to try and understand who might be leaving earlier in May so that we can help facilitate as many of these changes as possible. And then as we have spaces available in the spring, which won't be too many, but we will have a few, then we are going to exclusively offer those spaces to residents of 1351 and 1800. So they have the opportunity to move in the spring, right? Whether that's in February or April, depending on when the unit is available, so that we can work on emptying that building before that May 31st deadline. For students who are traveling during the summer, if you're able to have an opportunity to stay with family, or maybe you have an internship or a placement outside of the triangle, then considering a temporary summer move out might be a good option for you. What this would look like for 1351 is truly checking out and having to move your items into personal storage. I know we did provide a list of just some potential recommendations for storage in our initial email. You would not be charged June or July room rent. And we would work to potentially prorate your May room rent based on your checkout date. And then we would guarantee your placement back into your original unit. But it is going to be a furnished unit if you're in 1351, if you request that, or continue to look at another permanent placement back in August. So again, if you have some flexibility in your summer plans, if you were already planning on maybe doing something like a summer bridge, you might be able to take advantage of this option, which would potentially save you some room rent and would either allow you back into your current space when the hall reopen, or still take advantage of a different apartment transfer just after August. The same applies for residents of 1800, but because that building is not being furnished, we do have an option for furniture and some personal items to be left in 1800. But in this case, if a student were to do this, they would need to return their key and take everything that they need, because the student would not have access to their apartment during the summer. We'd want to make sure the apartment is left in good condition, so no trash or food, right? Something to make sure that the unit will be in a clean space so that you can move back into it. And then you would be guaranteed placement back into that unit again. We give you back your key when the building reopens in August. So just something that you might want to consider. We also know that we're going to have some potentially temporary spaces on campus that we might be able to house residents, not necessarily residents and all of their furniture, but residents for the summer. What this looks like are our traditional summer school housing spaces on North Campus. So these are furnished rooms. It is a corridor style bathroom and there's a shared kitchen in the building. So it's definitely not an apartment style that you're used to, but for students who again are wanting to stay in the area, maybe need to stay in the area, but do not want to risk moving off campus permanently, would like to return to Beatty Hill in the fall, this may be an option that is helpful for you to consider. We'll have a little bit more details about exactly what type of spaces these are, the rates, what this looks like in January when we're looking to get your kind of final decision on your plans for the summer. Thinking ahead to some long-term planning, 1351 and 1800 are just the first two buildings that are going to have this fire safety system upgrade. This is a necessary upgrade that all of our buildings will go through. So what this means is that we anticipate 1401 and 1700 will come offline next summer in the same type of process. And then for the years after that, it will be another two buildings a summer until we've completed this project. So for those of you that know you were planning on living at Beatty Hill for maybe more than just one more year, so for 2 or 3 years, that maybe something you want to consider is that right now we can't guarantee for sure which buildings will come offline each summer, and it is possible that you could end up in an apartment transfer to a building that then comes offline again. So we just want to be upfront that this is going to be an ongoing project over the next few summers until we have taken care of all buildings within the community. Now, we will try our absolute best to not offer reassignments into 1401 and 1700 so that students aren't doing this back-to-back summers unless you've let us know that you're only planning to live on campus for more than 1 year, in which case then you would be a good fit for an assignment into one of those buildings. There may be some of you on this call or students in general who just choose to move out of Beatty Hill, either graduating, you're trying to move off campus. We will work to offer a limited number, again, of prorated May room rents based on the checkout date between May 1st and May 16th. So we're hoping that some of this offer will create vacancies earlier in May, which will allow us to turn those units in time to be able to reassign students out of 1351 and 1800 before that May 31st date. So we'll send out information about this once we do our formal application open email, which again, you can expect in the next week or so. This is kind of the limited offer based on, the need that we have to reassign students. And so if that is you, or if that is another student on this call who's maybe not a current resident of 1351 and 1800, you're welcome to reach out to us with those questions and we can talk you more through it. But for all students, your contract goes to May 31st, and normally your move out date would not change your rent amount. This would be a limited change specifically to be able to open up some spaces to accommodate the residents out of 1351 and 1800 who need a reassignment. So the next steps for you all is to start thinking really carefully about your summer housing needs, because there are two questions that you'll need to answer for yourself: is what is your goal in the summer, and then what is your goal in the fall? And you'll want to make sure that you have an understanding of what your options are so you can start to make a plan to determine what your next steps are. If you would like to return to Beatty Hill for the 25-26 academic year, you will want to make sure that you complete the housing contract by January 17th. And then all students in 1351 and 1800, regardless of if you are deciding to return to Beatty Hill or not, there is a formal summer 2025 plans form that you will need to fill out. So I know many of you have already filled out an initial form, which helped us collect some just first impressions of what students would like to do. We'll be asking you to fill out this form in January, and that will kind of be your final decision that I am deciding to vacate, or I am requesting an apartment transfer to stay within the community for another year, another 2 years. This form will open on January 6th, and we'll send that link out in an email once we have that. We will also be using this form to help order the reassignments that we will do. So we want to make sure that you know that date ahead of time. So if you're someone who is interested in returning, two dates are really important: January 17th and January 6th. You want to make sure that you fill out both the housing contract for the next year and submit your apartment transfer request in that summer 2025 plans form once it opens up. And I think we have an opportunity for some Q&A. So I'm going to take a look here
Yes.
at our list.
If you like, Jordan, I can read the questions out to you. We've got a couple
Sure.
here. Well, I do want to make note, one individual asked a question that had already been asked, so we will not repeat both of those, but um, I'll start here. I am a 1351 resident in an unfurnished option. Can I return to 1351 and still have an unfurnished apartment?
So the answer to this would be no, you cannot return to 1351 without it being into a furnished unit. So we are going to furnish all spaces within the building. What would be a better option for you instead is that you would be asking for an apartment transfer into a different, unfurnished space within the community pending availability.
Thank you. If we need to move out or transfer apartments, what happens to our parking spots? Will we have parking in the new building, and will we be reimbursed for the 2 or more months that we cannot use our parking passes? I could actually answer this one if you want, Jordan. So parking, if you are transferred to another building at Beatty Hill, we will do all that we can to make sure that everyone who has parking currently still has parking to roll that throughout the current year. If for some reason we cannot offer you parking services will reimburse that difference to you because you would be canceling the parking for the remainder of that term. But with the way the term process works at Beatty Hill over the summer, I don't anticipate we would have a problem getting folks parking as they transition to new spaces. Now, remember, your parking gets redone every year. So if you're in a two-bedroom apartment, there's a discussion between you and that resident to determine who's going to have the parking for the next year. So this does not mean your parking would carry over into the 25-26 year. I also do want to note there are some folks that are dropping questions into the chat. If you would, please move those over to the Q&A so we can answer them in the order that they come in. The next question, though, for Jordan, is, are there any units currently vacant that we can move into earlier?
So right now we do not have very many open for the fall. I know one we have, for instance, is an 1800, so that is not helpful. But we'll anticipate that we'll have some for the spring. And so again, there is a couple week turn process. So as we have students that let us know that they're graduating this fall, they've decided to move off campus for whatever reason, we are going to prioritize filling those with students from 1351 and 1800. And it's also the reason why we will not be offering a spring 2025 application for any new residents because our goal would be able to use whatever vacancies we have to accommodate the residents from these two buildings instead of any new or incoming students.
Are transfers going to be handled in a first come, first served basis? Does it matter when we apply for a transfer?
So that's a great question. So we are going to use that summer 2025 plans form I mentioned right at the end. And based on the room type you're asking for, the date that you submit, and then our availability, we are going to go in order. So in a sense, it is first come, first serve based on the date you filled out that apartment transfer form. So we've told you that it's going to open up January 6th at 9 a.m. So everyone can mark that on their calendar, and that if at that point in time you've decided, yes, I would like to transfer, I'd like to be considered, as long as you have a completed housing contract, then we will start making those offers from that form in the order in which they've been received, again, based on the type of space that you've asked for and our availability.
Next question is, what are the furnishings that are included in a furnished apartment?
Stephen, do you want to answer this one?
Yes, I can. So the furnished apartments will have they will have a full or queen size bed. I do not remember exactly, so I do apologize there. They will also have a dresser in the bedroom, and then the living room will have a dining table and chairs. The living room itself will have a couch, a chair, a coffee table, and an end table. Furnishings do not include washer and dryer, do not include pots and pans. It's just the large furniture items that are in the space. Next question is, can we keep our car parked if we leave 1351 for the summer?
So this is part of what Stephen mentioned earlier, is that ideally we'll be looking at other options within the community, but that right now I don't anticipate that you'll be able to leave them in the 1351 lot at the moment.
Currently, I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment. If I want to move to a family housing instead of transfer, is that possible? Since I'm going to be getting married around March, can I be transferred to family housing instead? And also, if that works, when will it happen?
So we would consider any move from one apartment to another to be an apartment transfer. So if your status has changed and you would be no longer a graduate roommate style and you're looking for family housing, then you would be able to submit your form based on those preferences. Um, our ability to be able to offer you a family unit will again depend on what we have open. And we'll have current families right now with children, for instance, that are also impacted by this move. And the majority of our units that are designated as family, will be directed to those as we have those open. The date of the transfer, again, is really dependent on when our existing units start to vacate and they've been turned. That's what we hope to have more information for you all in February after we've processed the intent to vacate forms, so we know what spaces we have and around when we can anticipate they'll be available. We will do as many in the spring as we can, and that is just going to be dependent on when those units open up.
Next question is, if we leave furniture in 1800, will we be charged rent over the summer? And I'll answer this one, Jordan, because I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. If you leave your furniture in 1800, we would treat that like we do our summer bridge. So the summer bridge is you move out, but you turn in your keys, and you do get a discount in the rent over the summer. We wouldn't allow you to just not pay rent and occupy that space for the entirety of the summer. So we do have some summer bridge students. As a refresher for that is if you leave, you have to be gone for a minimum amount of time, which is generally the 2 months of the summer. There's some more, we can communicate that out to the residents, more specifics, but if you do leave your furniture there, you would pay a portion of the rent over the summer for leaving the items there. The next question is, I'd prefer to return to my unit in August, but I need a place for the first 2 weeks of June. Would the North Campus housing you talked about be a good fit in my situation? Is it possible to know whether a room there is available before the deadline of the Beatty Hill application?
So I do think that a potential space on North Campus would be a good fit for your situation. I think we're working to have those details hammered out in January as best as we can. So I can't confirm that we'll know for sure by the date of the application. But if your goal is to return to Beatty Hill for 25-26, I would encourage you to submit both the form and the contract by the deadline. That way we have you on our list and then we can continue to work through, what the specific options are from there.
I've got questions in both the chat and the Q&A, so I'm going to go through all the Q&A first before we get to the chat. So if you have dropped it in the chat, please drop it in the Q&A. I'm in 1800. If I move out in the summer and keep my furniture here, will I be charged rent for the summer? We did discuss that, actually. My apologies. The second part, though, is, and after I come back, can I switch my room in the same unit from the B to the A space?
We'll always review those requests. The challenging part of those is when you're doing that, you're essentially taking up two spaces at once, and then there is a delay in when we can assign a new student into the space that you're leaving, because that room will also need to be cleaned. So we will review all those requests, and if we can honor it, then we will try. But because we anticipate there are going to be a lot of students who need these reassignments, that we may not be able to honor as many of those types of preferences, right? A specific room transfer, a specific location that we may have been able to do in past summers.
This one is a multi-part question, so we're going to do them one by one. The 1351 move out can the 1351 move out be prorated before May 16th, but the building does not need to be vacated until May 31st? Is there an option to move out between the 16th and the 30th? So you want to take that one, Jordan?
Sure. So yes, there is an option to move out during those times. Your contract, ends the 31st. So students can choose to move out, but at that point in time, there would not be a prorated room rent option. So if you're not able to move out before the 16th, then you would move out on the date that you can before your contract end date, but you'd be responsible for that normal amount of your May room rent.
For temporary move-outs, is parking available at 1351 for summer? That one we have actually answered, that parking is not available. Given that construction timelines can sometimes extend due to unforeseen delays, can Carolina Housing provide any contractual assurances or alternative housing solutions if the expected August 1st reopening date is delayed?
So because of what you said, right, there are sometimes unforeseen delays. There's no way for us to provide any type of assurance, a guarantee that we're going to be able to offer another option. So the rest of our housing, for instance, our temporary housing option that we know will be available during the summer, those spaces will be booked in the fall for our undergraduate students. So there'll be an end date of when those spaces will be able to be used and then have to be returned back to our team to repair for incoming fall residents. So right now we have spoken with our facilities team to get an understanding of the scope of this project. What are the potential pitfalls? We feel very confident that these projects in both 1351 and 1800 are going to move on as scheduled. Should that change, we'll be communicating that. But as of right now, we feel confident that we're going to be able to complete all of the work necessary by that first week of August.
And I would also just like to add to what Jordan said. This is not usually the type of construction project that has far-reaching delays because there is equipment involved with this, but this is equipment that they'll have well on hand before they even start the project. So yes, construction projects are always of a concern, and it also depends on the scale of said project, like an elevator replacement, because there's a 30-week lead time on that equipment is very different than the projects that we're going to be doing down at Beatty Hill this summer. The next question is our housing rents changing for 1351 or 1800 or Beatty Hill in general after the summer?
Good question. So yes to both of those. So in general, our rates update each year. Those rates for 25-26 for any of our properties, including our undergraduate housing, are not finalized, although we anticipate a 6 to 8% increase. So you'll see that note on the housing application and on the website. Those rates have to be reviewed and approved by the Board of Governors. So we wait for the final decision on that. So in general, yes, those rates will change. And then in particular for 1351, they will be furnished units, so they all would be charged at whatever the new 25-26 furnished room rate is. If you'd like to see an example of those current rates, you can go on the Baity Hill website and you would see what those are for the 24-25 year.
Um, for 1351 here, if we go out of the apartments by May 31st, but no new apartment is available before June 1, will the cost of storing our items be entirely on us? Also, our moving cost of furniture on us?
So yes, if you need to use personal storage for your items, then those costs and the process of moving would be a student responsibility.
Um, But also, I do want to add to that, if you are moving out and you're not going to be housed with us for the summer or storing items in the building, we will not be charging you room rent because you will not occupy the space. So there's where the storage would come in. If we move outside of Beatty Hill during the summer and plan to come back, are we able to keep parking for building 1800? If you're not a resident, you won't be able to maintain parking there. Sorry about that, Jordan. I should have let you take that one. Also, I'm not sure I understand the answer to the first time, first served basis. Will applications submitted just before the deadline be given less consideration?
Good clarification. So for the 25-26 contract renewal, there is no priority in that process. It's just all contract renewals. So students need to basically confirm their intent to live with us again for the 25-26 year by January 17th. For the specific residents of 1351 and 1800, you all will have an additional form that every single resident must fill out to tell us exactly what you're looking for. And that is going to be an opportunity for us to collect a lot of data of, are you interested in using one of these temporary North Campus options that we have? Do you intend to return to your specific unit, but you have found your own housing for the summer, right? That's why that form is going to be so detailed. And for students who are using that form to say, I would like to transfer as soon as possible into a new permanent unit, then we will make those apartment transfers in order of when those forms have been received. So that form opens January 6th at 9 a.m. And that is the data that we will use in the order in which they are received to process those transfer requests. If you're someone who is just going to move out off campus, you still need to fill out that form to let us know that your confirmed plans have been made, but the first come, first served process doesn't apply to you.
The next question is because they're in the normal apartment transfer request form, there's some mentioning of charges. Will residents moving out of 1351 or 1800 be charged a transfer?
No, absolutely no. There'll be no transfer fee applied to any student in these buildings who end up moving.
The next question is if we move out in the summer, will Beatty Hill track our mail and package mail services?
So if you are moved to another space in Beatty Hill, or if you are a summer resident with us in an undergraduate space, there are mail options because those would go through normal processes. But if you have moved off campus, you will need to have your mail directed to your off-campus address.
Um, so one of the questions is how do you factor families and children? Will they be prioritized when the form that's going to open up on January 6th is on a first come, first served basis?
The families with children typically get priority for like 2 bedroom, 2 bath units as opposed to others because they need the space. And so we will do our best, depending on how many we have, to make sure that in the order that we're going to offer those particular types of units to families, right? Family units will go to families as opposed to others. But the details of exactly how many we have, if that's going to work with timing for families, that's what we'll need to wait until the end of January, as we hear back from our current residents to figure out.
Okay. Um, the apartment transfer form will open up on January 6th. Until then, is there anything else we need to do?
You would just want to keep in mind that you'll also need that housing contract renewal. So that is January 17th. So if you are planning on returning with us, remember there are 2 that you need to fill out. This form, which we will make available on January 6th, and the housing contract renewal, which will be open in the next week. That's through the My Housing portal. It'll look very similar. It's the same type of housing application. That's you again, just confirming your intent. And that's what makes you eligible to potentially receive an assignment for the next academic year.
Next question is if we use temporary housing, will there be any issues moving into those options if we have an ESA or service animal?
If you have an ESA or service animal and you've gone through equal opportunity and compliance, then that animal may come with you.
Will Beatty Hill provide any support during moving within Beatty Hill?
No, like our normal summer turns or apartment transfer process, we don't have the ability to offer moving assistance.
Um, the question here is, and this is kind of a reiteration, is for 1351, will the rate reflect that of 1101 of a furnished unit?
Sorry, I'm just
Answer.
reading the question. Steven, do you want to take that?
Yep. So for the residents that are going to be moving into 1351 in the fall, those room types will be considered furnished room types or furnished rooms. So we would charge you at the furnished room rate. If you are a 1351 resident now that wants to return somewhere in the fall and you do not want a furnished unit, we'll have to place you elsewhere at Beatty Hill in another building that's not furnished because we will furnish those spaces and then we will charge the furnished room rent rate. And the reason for furnishing another building down there is we have a lot of demand for furnished housing and we don't have a lot of supply. So this is an opportunity for us to get a little bit closer in meeting that demand. I'm intending to move within Beatty. I sent an email to Beatty Hill and they told me that the transfer might not be able to happen before June 15th. In that case, will the cost of storing my items be entirely on me, even though I have no option to stay in my apartment?
Yes, so your current housing contract ends May 31st. And unfortunately, because we have to close and vacate these buildings, it may be possible that we don't have enough spaces available right away to transition everyone who'd like to continue living immediately into a new space. So if you end up finding storage or temporary housing for a couple weeks and then you're able to move back into a different unit, any of those storage or moving costs would be absorbed by the student.
In case I were to transfer and preferred an unfurnished unit, would that preference be taken into consideration?
We will absolutely take them into consideration, try and match them as best as we can. And then ultimately, the offer that you've received, you'd have the opportunity to accept or decline. But the majority of our spaces are unfurnished. So that is maybe easier than someone who prefers a furnished unit. Although folks that prefer a furnished unit, we're now going to have an entire building with brand new furniture. So I think that'll be a great option for many as well.
Um, I also have one here in the chat. There was a question in the chat about estimate on the cost of leaving the furniture in 1800 over the summer. I would actually encourage you to contact the office directly. It is hard to give an estimate without knowing your unit type and the date specifically that you're trying to be gone, because there are some conditions with the what we call the summer bridge and differences in housing costs based on room type. It's best that you contact our office. You can email us, and we'd be happy to get an estimate to you for that. So that concludes the questions that were in the Q&A and the chat. If I missed yours, please drop us drop a question in there now so we can answer that for you. We do have a couple minutes. I do want to reiterate that we do appreciate y'all's patience in this matter. We know that this is a stressful and hectic occurrence, and the need for the fire safety equipment piece is just something that we unfortunately have to do, and we have to do it in all of our buildings. The challenge with Beatty Hill is that because those buildings are 12-month contracts, they never close. Whereas undergraduate housing, these type of projects are easily absorbed over the summer. Beatty Hill, unfortunately, we have to close buildings to make this a reality. So I'm not seeing any questions. So I would encourage you to contact us if you have any and we can't answer them for you here today. Please be on the lookout. We will continue to provide information as we have information to provide and to keep an eye on the lookout for those forms that Jordan mentioned. But we'll stay here for just a couple more minutes and see if anyone else has any questions for us. We'll give another minute and then we'll end this meeting because I'm not seeing anything. I'm actually seeing folks that are leaving, so that's usually a sign that we're wrapping up. All right, here. Um, what documents are needed for family housing?
So typically those things would be like a marriage certificate, a affidavit for a domestic partnership, and then birth certificate for dependents.
Will the meeting recording be available online? If so, where and how soon?
We will work to send out the recording by the end of the week to all 1351 and 1800 residents.
Is there a limit on the number of dependents?
So our biggest unit is a 2 bedroom, 2 bath unit. So that may be a self limitation. Stephen, do you have a specific answer for that one?
There is no, let me think about that for a second. Um, Not that I can think of. The only thing that could come into question would be there's not a specific positive number, but there's an occupancy standard that the fire marshal would set and what would safely be in a space. If you have a lot of dependents and are concerned about that, I would encourage you to contact us. We can work with the fire marshal because some of that will also depend once again on the unit type that you're in. A 2 bedroom is going to have a different than a 1 bedroom. I have a couple here in the chat. Will we have access to the slides after the meeting? We
Yes,
can.
I can attach those in the same email we send with the recording.
And then one here, we've answered this one earlier, but if you already pay for parking until 7:31, but you move out of the hall, will you get refunded? That is a question that you would need to speak directly to parking services. But if you're no longer a resident, you can cancel your parking, and you would actually have to cancel your parking so that you're not paying for it for that time frame. And generally, parking is billed on a monthly basis or in an installment method. Well, for students, that's not always the case, but you should be able to work with parking to get a refund for that time frame that you're not there. All right. Well, that concludes the questions. So we thank you once again for your time. Thank you, Jordan, for going over the information. We do appreciate y'all's patience in this matter. If you have questions that we did not cover today, I want to reiterate, please feel free to contact us with those questions. We know that there's a lot of uncertainty around what the temporary options and what the transfers are going to look like, and we will give that information as soon as we have it, but we've got to get into the recontracting period to see who's going to be moving because that's what's going to make the spaces available for that to be an option. So once again, thank you. And that concludes this meeting today. So we hope all is well and have a great day.